If you want this podcast free of ads, follow us now on patreon.com/David McWilliams.
What in the world is happening on Wall Street?
Economic indicators.
Who knows where this is going to end up?
To understand the economy, you have to understand human nature.
This podcast is powered by Acast.
Are you ready there, Sunshine?
Yes, I'm rolling away.
That's extraordinary that you're so prone and prepped.
Just trying to get you on the move, man. Come on, let's go.
How are you, Head?
I'm great.
How's your week been?
The week's been good. I actually had a pint in a glass, which is a big deal. Except for the missus went down to the local and we sat there.
What is your local?
O'Dwyer's on Kilmacud Road. Good spot. It's a good spot.
Okay, I know it from driving that way, but I've never been inside it.
Yeah, no, it's a good spot.
Good. Well, I have been Dalkey Festival.
Yes.
Up the yin yang.
Yeah.
It has been. I tell you, because obviously we're going live this Friday coming, and I've had the most marvelous conversations only today with Matt Damon, my new best friend.
Matt Damon.
Bernie Sanders, my old mate.
Hello, David.
Brian Cox. No, Bernie Sanders is David. You have got to understand. You got to understand that the American people are suffering, and we can fix it. No,
hello, Sean. How are the kids?
Yeah, how is Sean and the kids? Anyway, always good. But Matt Damon, I had an amazing conversation with him this morning, just before the gig, right?
Right.
Before the conversation I'm going to have with him. He's such a sweetheart. He's so decent, so open, so funny. Really, really funny.
Right.
And then we got this really brilliant gig with Edge from U2, obviously, and Brian Cox.
I love Brian Cox.
Talking about music, creativity, and astrophysics.
It's so up my street. That's brilliant. I'm really looking forward to that one.
And again, so what you're doing is when you're putting those gigs together, you put them together months in advance.
Yeah.
And then, the last few days, you got to call everybody, make sure they're happy with what you're going to ask them or what's coming down the line. And with Bernie, it was like, I've never heard him in such good form. I was on the phone to him the other night and he's in flying form. I actually really think that his world has changed since becoming this sort of the head of the budget committee.
Yeah.
It's kind of completely invigorated.
Well, he has a bit of power now.
He's got a lot of power now.
Yeah.
I mean,
whereas before he was just, like, with all due respect, he was just a talker.
Well, no, he was the leader of a left-wing movement, and now that left-wing movement is front and center, and he's got the gig.
Yeah.
He's got the gig.
But he couldn't do anything, but now he can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then Brian Cox is so funny talking to him because he's got this fantastic sort of Mancunian Oldham accent, and his enthusiasm for everything is amazing.
Yeah.
Also, I was talking to Elif Shafak again today, you know, the Turkish writer who is so fantastic. She's so brilliant. And Isabel Allende. We've got the president coming, which is going to be fantastic because the president, you've no idea where he goes with the conversations. We've got this basic idea we're going to talk about, but it could go off in tangents. And it's
part of the fun though, actually.
Yeah. So I can't wait. And the tickets are flying out. It's actually dalkeybookfestival.org if you want your tickets. Interestingly.
And it's really worth it actually because it's, how many?
Well, we've 25 events over 3 days, €50 the ticket. I mean, I think it's really good.
Wow.
And what we've done...
£2 event.
An event. But what we've done is we've engaged with a TV production company, Fuel, to actually make something that looks and feels like immersive broadcast quality. So we've gone away from just doing the Zoom on Zoom idea. Because I think people are fed up with that.
Of course they are, yeah.
So the idea is we filmed the whole thing in the tower, the Martello Tower, which is extraordinary.
Yeah.
It's an amazing place. And we're trying to bring to it, this is like a broadcast quality production. And the chats will be, I think they're going to be, actually the funniest thing is, I really miss the live gig, right?
Yeah.
And I miss the big tent and I miss people coming out and having a laugh. But if you're going to try to do remote, if you're going to try, you've got to actually do something that's an experience, that's broadcast quality. You can't just, do it. So,
but do you know what? There's such an amazing lineup. You're talking about Brian Cox and The Edge and Matt Damon and President and Bernie and all the rest. But you haven't mentioned the highlight.
which is
the
you
headline.
and me.
Yes.
It's you and me, the David McWilliams
Damn right.
podcast. John Davis, who has clearly got a face for television. You will see what he looks like. You'll see what
It's
he
gonna
looks
be
like.
brilliant.
And we are talking to two exceptionally brilliant women. Stephanie Kelton,
Yes.
who is basically the brains behind the Bernie stroke Biden idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my mate Marla,
Who's brilliant. Every time she's on, she's brilliant.
she is. So she's going to be talking again about, and it's a really deep idea that, we in the West are up here because it's the global North. We've got the vaccines. We've got MMT if we want to. We can print money. We can fix everything. She's saying, whoa, wait a second. What about us down here in the
exactly.
South? We don't have these options. So we have these brilliant talkers. Also, Kate Rayworth, you remember her?
Yes.
Doing Donut Economics. She's on.
yeah.
So it's all at dorkybookfestival.org. We kick off on Friday. I think it's going to be absolutely magic. And if you want to hear these conversations, just buy yourself a ticket. And I hope you really enjoy it because I think it's going to be a fab weekend.
Absolutely. And actually, one of the guys who will be there this weekend is a guy we're about to talk to now.
Eric Lonergan. Again, one of the finest Irish economists. Didn't devote his time to, left Ireland many years ago, but has an amazing take on the world. Obviously, the book we're going to talk with him about at Dorky is Engrainomics, his book with Mark Blythe. But today we're going to talk about something that you're interested in. We're all interested in.
Yeah.
Money. What is it? What makes it tick? What's our attraction to it? Is it a philosophy? Is it an economics idea? Is it a network idea? Is it something that people do weird things for and why? I mean, it's an amazing subject. And again, the reason we're talking about it is economics without money doesn't work. So let's go and talk to Eric. Now, over the last couple of months, money, the nature of money, what is it? Is there too much of it? Is there too little of it? Has been really something that has moved mainstream. What is quite amazing is money was never mainstream, or the fact that it wasn't mainstream is kind of interesting, right? But if you're a Bitcoiner, you believe that money should be hard, it should be only a certain amount printed, and it should always be scarce. If you're an MMTer, on the other hand, you believe, hey, presto, let's print, let's fix, let's use money as a tool. So the idea that money can be a tool or it should be scarce kind of goes to the deep question of what the hell is money? What is it? And I'm glad on the podcast today, we plucked him out of London, is Eric Lonergan, who has written a book a while back on the philosophy of money. Eric, how are you?
I'm exceedingly well. Great to see
How are you,
pair of you.
Yeah.
Very good. Can't complain and can't wait to talk about money.
Okay. No, seriously though, because I mean,
absolutely,
you
it's
wrote,
fascinating.
The book is, John said to me, frankly, he said, Macker, what the fuck is money? Right? He said,
Well, I tell you what it is over the last while, we've been talking, well, like I put myself in the school of David McWilliams economics, but I've come to that stage where when we're talking about Bitcoin in particular and about currency and value and all the rest, I came to realize that it's an incredibly abstract concept, money in itself, without Bitcoin. So for all the kind of confused members of this podcast club, what is money?
Okay.
And what makes a currency?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to start with the philosophy and then I'm going to make it really mundane and simple, because the thing I love about it is let's start with the abstract, right?
Yeah.
So I actually think to understand money, so there's a couple of different things. First, what is it, right? And then why does it have value?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And those are two very separate ways to think about it. And I think those are two things that economists have struggled with.
But can I just stop you there? I think most economists don't understand money.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah.
I really do. I know this might sound like a revelation. If you're listening, I actually have worked with economists for the last 30 years, and I can count on my hand the number who understand money, who have an appreciation of the significance of money. Would you believe, I'm going to go off to Eric now in a second, the vast majority of economic models do not have money in them. Now think about that. So the economic models upon which the IMF, the World Bank, the Irish Central Bank, the Bank of England base their forecasts of the economy don't have a variable for money.
I don't get that at all.
That's like, look,
They assume it away.
they
I'm even more
I know it's
confused.
mad. Right. Okay. So Eric, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go.
But that's the beauty of it, right? So it's this thing that's so obvious to us all because we all use it all the time, and yet it's simultaneously mysterious. And so there's a couple of things I want to throw out there just as thoughts to leave there in your mind. The first one is, I think the closest analogy to money is actually language, right? If you can understand why one language wins, why one language is useful to us and another language less so, you'll understand money. So that's one thing. We can come back to that. The other thing I'm going to say as well is that money isn't a thing, it's a property of things, right? Now, what do I mean by that is you can literally use anything if you want to as money, right? So it's a property and it shifts. This is why, to be honest, it's probably impossible to model. This is why, in a way, the economists want to get it out of their models, because then they can model something. If they put it in,
It's too tricky.
It's too tricky.
It's too messy.
It's too slippery.
Yeah.
It starts moving around, right? Now, then, what is it? It's incredibly simple. And I was reading something the other day about it, and somebody said, I asked my 6-year-old daughter, what's money? And she said, it's what you use to pay for things.
End of story.
Bingo. Right? That's all it is. It's what you use to pay for things. Now, it has other properties as well, but its kind of defining characteristic is that it's what you use to pay for things.
Right.
But when you nail it down then and actually go through what are its properties, why do we use one money rather than another? How can it suddenly be a money and then disappear? That's where it starts to get complex. And so the point about language is that, and this is one of the things I love about money, is money is, of course, associated with greed and avarice and selfishness and property rights.
Yeah.
And yet the truth is that the money only has value as a social construct. It only has value.
Let's focus on this because this is the fascinating part. No,
Okay.
let's focus on this idea.
So money gets its value from the fact that it's a social construct. And so the money that, if I have 20 euros in my pocket, that only has value because you'll accept it.
Yeah.
Right? So it depends on social acceptance. And that's where we start to understand why it's common to language. Because people have tried to construct better languages. Is it Esperanto supposed to be a brilliantly
the kind of
learnable
Hungarian
language?
guy who came up with Esperanto. Yeah,
That's right.
And we were all going to speak it, and
That's
nobody
right.
took it up.
That's the best technology. And this is the mistake a lot of people make. And this is where we'll get to the Bitcoin and MMT. But people often go, the best technology wins. No. In languages, the best technology doesn't win. I mean, English is a god-awful language to learn. Its grammar's inconsistent. It's all over the place.
So is Irish, by the way.
Yeah.
And so is Irish, And Irish, actually, we should think about it because Irish is interesting in this context. So the thing is that the language that wins in a way, language is exactly the same. I mean, if I come up with Lonergan language, sorry, it's like, might be great, but fuck all use to anyone else, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's the same with money. If you and I, we create our own private money, it's of no use to us at all. But so what is that? It's it's a bit like, it's called a network externality in economics. It's the same as a mobile phone. There's no point in me having a mobile phone if nobody else has one.
Sure,
so
yeah,
it's one of those things that the value to the individual actually depends on the fact that other people find it useful as well. So that's a kind of introduction to the idea. It's something that we pay for. It's a property, and it's a changeable property. When I say it's a property, cigarettes, I mean, most of us use cigarettes to try and die young. Obviously, if you're
Don't
in a
mention
prison,
John. We're out of John's completely. John's favorite line in the podcast is, hold on, I'm going out for a fag. Right? I swear to God, it happens.
there we go. And yet, in prisons, cigarettes become money. Now, money isn't a cigarette, but a cigarette can be money. And this is the same if you then take it to, from the prisons to the financial crisis. So a cigarette, once you leave the prison, it's no longer useful in the same way because it's no longer money. You have to actually use dollars and cents. Now, to the same extent, if you think of the banking system, most of us think of our money as being a deposit in a bank because that's what we use to pay for things. But if the bank is bust, it stops being money. It disappears.
Yep.
Right? Because if you go there and
there's no money there.
There's no money there.
Yep.
All of a sudden, it's no good. Or the same with your credit card. Visa's money. And yet, if I've run through my credit limit and they say no, it's not money anymore. So money is a property of things. It's closest in terms of where it gets its value from. In my view, it's this idea of a network. It's an external. Its value depends on its acceptance by others, and that's very different to most of the things we think about.
And Eric, can I stop it there? What I find really incongruous about money is, on the one hand, its value as a property that we use and accept depends on widespread acceptance, but yet scarcity.
Yeah.
Having lots of money depends on you having more than everybody else.
That's a good
So
point.
this is the odd thing, is that so there's an incredible incentive to hoard money, to take it out of circulation, when its real magic depends on it being in circulation.
Yeah.
And these are things that people can't get their heads around. And
Yeah.
when I hear the Bitcoiners, and I'm not having to go Bitcoiners,
For sure.
but they are the latest incarnation of what we call in economics hard money, that money has to be gold or has to be a commodity, it has to be fixed, and it has to be changed with something hard. And then there's the soft squidgy money, which is the money you're talking about, which is the network money.
Yeah.
I also look at, how money took off. Like if you look at Facebook, right? Facebook is of no interest or no value to anybody if nobody uses it. But what is amazing with it, Facebook then converts, every Facebook user converts another user, or Twitter user converts another user. And I've always thought that the way in which money is accepted is very like those social networks.
I totally agree. And I wrote about this a while back, funnily enough, was reading the Scottish philosopher David Hume. And Hume talks about this idea that wherever you get a group of human beings living together, a society, there are three spontaneous institutions. So things that are just that we will create if we have a group of humans. One is money, one is language, and the other is law. We need rules, we need language, and we need a medium of exchange. We need something to pay for things. And I think you're right. And it made me think that, if you had a portfolio that was designed by David Hume, it would be, it would be Facebook, it would be Visa and MasterCard.
Yeah.
I mean, these are...
And it would be shares in a very large, dubious law firm.
Yeah.
That is always on the wrong side, because I write those Grisham novels.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
But let's keep it, because what John asked, I think, is it's the kind of abstraction.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because like Yuval Harari compares it to religion, that it only exists because we all believe it.
Yeah.
And it's the big myth. And the big myth is the euro actually can go and buy you a packet of smokes, in John's case, right?
Yeah.
No, but that's the big myth. Like that's,
I know.
And we can do that because you believe it's worth it, and I believe it's worth it. But when that myth breaks down, money actually disappears.
Money can disappear. Yeah.
Explain that to me, how it kind of disappears. It's almost like, you believe in the creed at mass.
Yeah.
And then one day you go at it when you're about 14, most people say, I believe that shite.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then it's gone.
Well, this is the thing about it being a property of things.
Okay.
So, and again, to the point of, you can imagine it if you think of the cigarette as well. And I think this was the same with the gold standard is, it would be of no use to you whatever on a desert island. You could have a chest full of euros. What use would it be?
Yeah.
So it is a social phenomenon, and the economists say it has no intrinsic value. I don't know if that's quite true, but it has no physical value.
Can I just ask you though, if you are on a desert island, when you talk about the spontaneity, something else would become the money.
We would provide,
it could be coconuts, or it could be fish.
We'll provide John with the box of Major. Right? a real card.
And a box of matches, I hope,
And
as
a
well.
box of matches.
But John, the thing is that only depends if there's more than one of you. You need a group. And then it would, you're absolutely right. And this is the thing. And this, this debate goes to the heart of M&T and crypto or Bitcoin. Because and I think to me, there's both fascinating, they're both right about a lot and wrong about other things. And the Bitcoin, I love us to come back to and talk, because what I think is amazing about Bitcoin, just to sort of finish on the philosophy point, Bitcoin to me is an original money, and it's original in two ways. It has intelligence for the first time. So we've actually given money an intelligence, right? It has an IQ. Well, what I mean by that is it determines its own propagation, right? So the rate
this is the algorithm thing.
Yeah, it's the algorithm. So it's got built into it its own way of growing. Now, all other monies in the past were typically controlled by a central authority, like our central bank decided how much money to produce. And Dave, you'll remember in the 80s, we had all these rules about the money supply growth, and the Germans were obsessed about the Bundesbank. Bitcoin it's not particularly clever. It's not high IQ, but it's got an IQ, and it's got its own rate of growth, which will eventually go to zero. So it's got an intelligence. That's fascinating. This is the first money humans have created with its own intelligence. The second thing is it's got a memory. Now, we've never had money with the memory, and what I mean by that is, 20. If I take out my 20 euros, you don't know where that's come from. Bitcoin, you know every
Because
transaction
of the blockchain.
because of the blockchain. You know every transaction. Every part of the node that's transacted. So that is fascinating to me, because if you get futuristic about this, it won't be Bitcoin, but we have now, the genie's out of a money with intelligence and money with memory.
I've never thought of it that way. I've never thought of it that way, that you've got traceable money.
Yeah.
And you can trace the transactions.
Like, what if we said
And the value of that is what?
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out. The value of that is from a societal point of view, to be able to actually trace transactions is incredibly both liberating on one hand, but kind of scary on the other. Because the one great thing about money is, the Romans had this great expression, Vespasian. I like all this shit, right? Vespasian, a great expression in Latin called pecunia non olet.
Oh, money
does not smell.
Yeah,
and it was about a tax on piss, right? Now, this is the truth. This is the truth. The Romans used piss, and it was very valuable for its potassium for cleaning things.
Yeah.
So the Romans, they actually preferred Portuguese piss, which is apparently, according to
high quality.
High quality. It was very, very high in potassium. They used to import piss from. They used to try and get their piss from Portugal, which is bizarre, right? But what they had was they had a tax on piss. So they had these big, big latrines in Rome, and you had a job called the piss collector. And he was the tax on piss, right? Because they'd pee into the thing, they'd collect the pee, and they'd sell it for cleaning. It was like J's, it was like toothpaste, everything. It brightens up everything. Potassium brightens up everything. And ammonia brightens up everything.
Ammonia, yeah.
Right? So the ammonia in the piss, they used to brush their teeth with. I know it sounds weird. So Vespasian was the most impressive conqueror, right? Not Caesar, not Augustus. Was Vespasian was the man. He was down in Israel. He was off in Britain. He was all over the shop. And if you conquer, you'd got to pay for things. So he was always a great tax collector too. Yeah. And he stood up and said, okay, we're taxing piss, right? He said, I know it sounds grubby and I know it sounds unhygienic, but that's what we're doing. And then when the senators came back to him, but he was the emperor, so the senators were only Mickey Mouse at this stage. And the senators came back and said, you can't be taxing piss, Vespasian.
You're taking the piss, man.
Vespasian says to them, pecunia non olet, meaning I don't care the origin of money. It doesn't smell, it's money, it's real. Coming back to the point of if you accept it. But he was also making the point, I think, that it has this ephemeral character, that it comes from nowhere, but once it's in use, it's unbelievable. So this is the idea, you can't trace it.
Yeah.
So to go from Vespasian to the Bitcoiners are now tracing it for the first time ever. And I think that is a different concept.
It has a memory.
Yeah, you can trace the transaction, not the individual.
Yeah.
Let's talk about MMT. So MMT comes with the promise that the state, using state money, fiat money, can fix things that heretofore, as they say in very elegant legalistic terms, in the old days, you couldn't fix because somebody said, you know what, you can't use enough of that because you'll have a budget deficit and you can't do that.
Yeah.
So explain to me the magic and the downside of MMT.
Yeah. Well, where MMT are absolutely correct is what they're observing on is that, as we've just described it, in the same way as language is free. It costs me nothing to produce it. Yeah. Right. And we can talk all day. And so too with money, right? So the state does not have a financial constraint. There's nobody out there who says, if you don't pay your taxes or the bond market is closed, you can't pay for things. Yes, you can, because the state can just, it's electronic digits. It's just creating them every year. So to that extent, and that is very, very important. People don't realize that. People don't realize that actually we just print it. We just create it on computers now rather than physically printing it. We physically print it as well. Now, the tricky bit starts to become then, well, is there any limit to what the state can do? And I think MMT are right about this as well, or certainly Stephanie Kelton is very clear about this. The only limit is inflation, right? So the only thing that's stopping us from printing more and more money is that ultimately, if you keep on doing it, prices will start to rise, and prices will start to rise inexorably if you keep on printing it. So that is very important. And that's been incredibly important over the last 20 years because we've broadly been more at risk of deflation, prices falling, than inflation, in which case, to all intents and purposes, governments don't have any budget constraint. And so all of the austerity and everything else, in a sense, has been a political fiction, either motivated by bad ideas or by disguised political intentions.
Or both.
Or both.
And I suspect both. But you've also made the point about QE and austerity. That QE, which was always accompanied, so in many cases, economists, certainly the mainstream economics, presented governments with a choice in 2008, 2009. They said, well, we will help you out by printing money, i.e. QE, or by making money available. But as a quid pro quo, you have to cut back on government spending. And you've made the point that...
How can that make sense? It's like the central bank is part of the government. How can I have a problem with my debt if I'm buying my own debt back? It's like, imagine you were buying your own mortgage. If you bought your own mortgage, do you still have a mortgage? I'm paying interest to myself. Makes no sense. If the government, so the reality is the developed world bought back the amount of debt that they issued during the financial crisis.
Exactly.
They bought that and more. So the reality is their debt didn't rise. So again, you get bogged down by the accounting. But if you look at net debt, so you take your assets and subtract them from your liabilities, which is what you should do. There actually hasn't been an increase in the net debt of the developed world because of quantitative easing. Absolutely crazy. You cannot simultaneously be in a situation where I can print money and buy back my bonds and buy back my debt.
Which is what QE is. QE is,
exactly.
By the way, okay? That was QE.
So QE is creating money to buy back your debt. Well, how can I have too much debt if I'm buying it back?
Exactly.
Makes no sense.
Yeah, no, it's true. But this was the big fallacy at the center of macroeconomics from 2008, arguably till last week.
Yeah.
I'm not when I say I mean last week. Like,
you're right.
You know,
yeah.
and I remember I used to sit there thinking, hold on, so QE, you're issuing bits of paper to pay back your debt. But on the one hand, you're saying we have too much debt and we have to bring it down. But how can you be urging yourself to bring back your own debt if with one hand you're buying it and the other hand you're saying...
But is it not shifting around between different people though?
But in an absolute sense, basically poor people suffered. That's what the upshot was, because if you are poor, you depend more on the state than if you're rich. So you spend it for health, for education, for transfers, for the dole, for your houses, whatever, right? So that's why I think it was ideologically driven. Unless the economics fraternity was completely blind to the inconsistency at the middle. But to come back to our friend money, right?
Yeah.
What's always intrigued me about money as well is and you as a half Italian, Eric, might get this. No, seriously. When I used to work in the markets and talk to economists, right? Germans feel that money is a public good like fresh air that must be and can only be protected, a bit like the environment, by legislation. Right? So it cannot be interfered with. It is a public good. And the more you interfere with it, the worse it is, right?
Yeah.
Italians, on the other hand, look at money as a tool to fix things.
Yeah.
Right? That basically, if you have a problem, you print a few more liras, that fixes your problem. You shift the economy onto some other level and away you go. And these were two profoundly different philosophical views of money.
Very true.
And now in Europe, what I've always said is the Italians have performed a coup d'etat at the ECB, right? Under Draghi, shh, don't tell a sinner.
Don't tell them.
But it's true, the German view of money has actually been on the descendancy for the last 10 years.
Well, that's a great way of framing things, because I think you've described what I still think is a contradiction at the heart of Europe that they haven't resolved, because it carries all of the baggage of the German mental scarring of the hyperinflation and the Italian kind of pragmatism, the willingness of the Italians to devalue whatever is necessary. You know, they're pragmatic.
Yeah.
Whereas and I think it's very hard when people go, why are the Germans, you know, why are they so obsessed with austerity, cutting budget, saving? People don't realize they pooled sovereignty. They gave away their precious Bundesbank.
Yeah, they did.
You know, if you think it was a constitutionally independent control of money, they didn't want their money to be in the hands of politicians, you know, but they gave it to Europe. Now, that was an incredible sacrifice for the Germans. And I think that's one of the reasons they're so resistant to pooling sovereignty on the fiscal side, to the idea that the whole of Europe can borrow as a European entity, because they're going, hang on a minute, we already gave away our money.
Yeah,
We're
that's
not
enough.
going to.
We're not going to give you lads. We're not going to give you lads the keys to the kingdom.
That's it. And I think that tension is still there.
Let's talk about money in the UK.
Yeah.
So Britain is always kind of an outlier on these things. It still has its own central bank. So the Bank of England can print whatever it wants. They can borrow, it seems, as much as they want.
Yeah.
The Bank of England can fix the rate at which not the markets. This idea the markets are powerful. The markets are no longer powerful, right? This is the dirty little secret that people don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
That the central banks have elbowed out the markets.
Yeah.
How do you think that will play out? I'm using the UK, but let's go to the States. Let's go to the States. How do you think it'll play out?
It's absolutely fascinating, this, because again, I think one of the most important features of the global economy is, you're entirely aware of this, is how low the cost of borrowing is to the government. Right?
Yes.
And I think the truth is, you and I can come up with some good explanations, but I think the truth is most economists actually can't explain that. They don't know why, which is why there's this permanent fear that all of a sudden interest rates are going to start rising again and everything will change. But the reality is that our governments can borrow for 10, 20, 30 years at extraordinarily low interest rates, fixed interest rates. And this gives them huge potential. My own view is that the factors behind that are probably deeply, deeply structural. Meaning that they're caused by the aging of the population, the concentration of wealth, so that there's a very huge propensity to save. I think life expectancy. So I think it's everything around savings behavior. So why is it, in a sense, that people have a sense of insecurity about how much money they need to accumulate? Well, I think that is about healthcare, about longevity, all of those deep insecurities. So I think that's one big factor. I think the other big factor is, and this is a bit of an economics point, is that we became wholly reliant on central banks to deal with recessions. Really, as you say, until the pandemic. The pandemic is an important turning point. But for the last 30 years, it's central banks, any sign of problems, you cut interest rates. When you cut interest rates, people borrow more. You increase leverage. Well, that meant every single time they had to cut interest rates, but they couldn't really raise them again. And I think you've had a pattern where rates are kind of come down, leverage grows and grows and grows, and then you can't raise the interest rates again.
But isn't this the sort of day of reckoning that you hear from a lot of people, usually politically on the right, usually believers in hard currency, usually have a sort of a nostalgia for the gold standard when money was gold? Because what they're saying is that we've waltzed ourselves up a sort of an intellectual cul-de-sac, whereas the lower the rate of interest, the more borrowing, the lower the rate of interest has to be, because if you raise the rate of interest, you get a debt implosion.
Exactly, yeah.
So
how does it end?
Yeah.
Well,
because this is to come back to the point about money.
Well, I'm more optimistic than that, because I think there's something else at the same time that's been amazing that's been happening in the global economy. And you've been talking about it recently with all the inflation scares. Could we go back to the 1970s? The only people who are worried about the 1970s are people who know nothing about the 1970s, right? I mean, the world could not be more different to the 1970s, when there were smoke-filled rooms, trade unions on behalf of the working population.
These are called the beer and sandwiches in the UK. Do you know what they call that? They'd sit around and the trade unions would have their beer and sandwiches, and they'd come in to Harold Wilson or to Jim Callaghan.
We're having a wage increase.
Yeah.
Incomes, policies, prices. But prices and wages were controlled centrally.
Yes.
And in that world, absolutely. I mean, can you imagine if let's say, you're the government, you're the trade unions, I don't know, I'm the arbiter. We get into the room, we look at the oil price, it's just gone up 50%. Thanks very much. You're putting up your prices. You're getting a wage increase. And that's what happened. And that's why we had that. Today is completely different. We have ferociously competitive global markets. I mean, the idea that anybody goes to their employer at the moment and says the oil price has gone up, give me a wage increase. You know what they'll tell you what to do, right? In fact, if anything, when the oil price goes up, our margins come under pressure, and there's downward pressure on wages. So it's a totally different world. It costs nothing now to set up a business. The cost of setting up a business has never been lower in human history than it is today. There is brutal competition left, right, and center. Everything's been deregulated, technology. So there's this irony that we've printed gazillions, but we've created ferocious global competition, which means nobody has any pricing power. And I think that's what's really killed the inflation. Now, at some point, I think what's actually happened is, ironically, this ended with negative interest rates. So it didn't end in a big bang where everybody defaulted or there was hyperinflation. It ended by us going, well, interest rates are now 0 or minus 75 or minus 0.75% in Europe. They can't go any further. Right? So we've got to do something else. And the something else, in a way, was MMT. You know, Janet Yellen doesn't call it MMT, but effectively they've said, we actually need the government to spend money. We need the government to step in here and create the demand.
The Powell, Jay Powell says, the Fed can lend, but it can't spend. So we can give you the money, but somebody's got to spend it. Now, I want to, before you go, Eric, I want to ask you, you manage money on a daily basis, right? So you think about money as an abstract concept, as a philosophical concept, but also as a real concept. You've got to make money, your job. Okay, how does the world of negative or low interest rates complicate your business?
Well, I tell you, I think it's a bad idea, and I'll tell you why. And again, this is the problem with economists. Sometimes we need to be tested with basic common sense, right? So the theory, which is, if you listen to Ben Bernanke or other people who advocated quantitative easing or negative interest rates, they go, well, if interest rates are negative, no one's going to want to hold cash. So they'll go and do other things, like they'll buy the stock market, or they'll take risks, or they start, building factories. Human beings don't work like that. I mean, if you put a negative interest rate on my cash, I go, how do I find a substitute? Right? Because there's a reason they're holding cash. The people who are hoarding lots of cash are actually afraid. They're risk averse. They're not going to run out and start buying the stock market.
Because their fundamental DNA is they don't want the stock market.
That's exactly right. So what happens in Northern Europe when you give them negative interest rates? They end up actually doing quite risky things to get equivalents of cash. So you get all of these complicated financial structures where somebody tries to take a portfolio of bonds and chop it up left, right, and center and provide a guarantee here and the full rate and a structured price. In other words, human beings with their ingenuity try to engineer alternative things that might be as safe as a deposit. So I actually think it's the sensible thing for them to do, which is put interest rates at about 1%. And start doing something clever. If you want to create demand, I'm a big believer in helicopter drops. Put some euros in the post. Every European citizen, if you want to create inflation or you want to hit your inflation target, send them 500 euros every quarter until you get to 2%. And then stop.
2% inflation, just say,
and then stop.
Go out and spend, and prices will rise naturally.
There you go. Don't do the negative interest rates, and give it equally to everyone. So if I'm German or I'm a Finn or wherever you are in Europe, the Dutch, everybody gets 500 euros. No one can complain. Completely fair. You can call it a perpetual zero interest rate loan. That'll satisfy the accountants.
But then, sorry, can I just jump in there? But then, the interesting thing that I've been reading a lot about recently is the whole labour market crunch at the moment. That's just going to exacerbate that, isn't it?
But I don't, the thing.
I know we're talking theoretically.
Let's talk. Here's another very important thing with inflation, and it's one thing that's useful in economics, is the idea of relative prices versus aggregate prices, right? So aggregate prices is inflation.
Yeah.
Relative prices is the market, right? And what relative prices means, one thing is going up, the other is falling, right? So semiconductor prices, they fall. The oil price at the moment is going up. That tells you spend less on oil and spend more on semiconductors, right? If the wages of somebody working in a restaurant are going up, we need more people to go and work in the restaurant. If the wages of an engineer are falling, we need fewer engineers, right? So the price of one thing going up and another falling is a market. That's actually what the markets are good at.
Right.
That's not inflation. That's good, right? Because that tells us what to do. That's prices working. And I think that's most of what's happening in the labour market. Most of it at the moment is that there are specific pockets where there are shortages. So price, oh, great. If you're in that area, your wages should be going up and more people should go in there. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
But if I look at Europe, you've still got youth unemployment in Italy, 20-30%. I mean, there is no shortage of workers. It would be fabulous if we had a shortage of workers in Europe, but we're a long, long way away from that.
Can we just conclude on the idea of giving out money, right?
Yeah.
And this comes to the morality of money. That if you say, and I agree with you, and we've been saying in the podcast, just give people money. But lots and lots of people say, here, hold on a second, right? You know what I mean? Say, here, hold on a second. Yeah. You can't be giving the stuff away.
For nothing.
For nothing, right?
Yeah.
So where does that come from, right? Our attachment to labor
Yeah.
You need to work and put in the hours in order to get rewarded in this scarce and beautiful thing that you can buy beautiful things with called money. And if you start giving the stuff away, it upsets my sense
I
of
hear
normality,
you.
right? It says my sense of right and wrong.
And even I'm going, they must be right. I mean, that must be right. But here's the thing, the way I would think of it in a number of different ways. Part of the reason we need to do it is we've become so productive. I mean, when people say, well, what does it mean, deflation? What it means is that we are able to produce more than we're spending on money on. So the reality is there are more people in Europe who should be employed. So we have the ability to produce more if people were spending more. Like that's the problem.
So that's
the
deflation.
crux.
That's your definition of deflation.
That's my definition.
We've actually got too good.
Exactly. We've got too good.
Right.
We can employ more people. We can produce more. We can work more. And the irony is, if you actually gave people more money, people would work more because they'd be spending more. We'd be employing more. We'd be creating more. That's the first thing I'd say. On the moral point, usually the same people believe in inheritance, right? Inheritance is something for nothing.
You're absolutely right. I hadn't thought of that.
Okay, so
you're right. It's always it's just not right to be giving money to these people. On the other hand, I'm going to bequeath to my lazy son who wasn't worth a fucking day in his life £1 million quid. Exactly. But that comes down to family.
This is
and
true.
That's a philosophical and a deeper discussion about psychology.
Yeah.
Whereas we tolerate things within our family because our bonds are so strong that we would never tolerate people outside the family doing. And that is, again...
This is true.
We started...
Can I give you a last answer then?
Go for it.
Well, your last one would be the fact is who owns language, right? And it's the same way with money. Is the money has been created by the state. So we all deserve a share of it. I would say, but with the condition that we're not going to go crazy and create inflation. But if we've got a problem with the inflation is too low, everybody should benefit. In a way, I think it's, how can you argue with that? We're not producing enough and it's ours collectively.
We own it.
We own it. So let's have some of it.
Let's leave it there.
Nice.
Eric Lonergan's book, Money, is again, he has a fantastic habit, and his last book is the same, Engrainomics, of writing mercifully short books. As I've always said, it's much harder to write a short book than a long book. If you want to get into the plumbing of money, how it actually works, who creates it, who doesn't, but also the deeper philosophical, social, emotional, and historical issues that, coming to grips, as John was saying, with money presents to you, I can't recommend it highly enough. Eric Lonergan, Money, and we'll talk to you soon, Eric. Thanks for dropping in.
Thanks a million, Eric.
It's
that
been
was
a pleasure.
great.
Thanks to the pair of you.
So the crucial thing about money, therefore, I'm beginning to understand it little by little, is its spontaneity. As they said in Jurassic Park, actually.
Did they say it in Jurassic Park?
No, they said life finds a way. And it seems that...
And money finds a way.
It's according to Eric, money finds a way. Something will always become tradable. Something will always become a currency of some sort.
Yeah.
Whether it's, as he mentioned, cigarettes
in a prison.
Or coconuts on an island.
Or as I've told you before, the M-Pesa in Kenya.
Yeah, that's
where
another
mobile
example.
phone credit became money. I think, and I really believe this, that money is by far and away the most innovative technology that humans have ever invented. And the reason I feel this is that money is not of the natural world. It doesn't exist in nature.
Yeah.
It only exists where you have humans. So it is an invention of the human mind. And it is a technology, and I believe it's a technology, most importantly, to bring us together. So it's a social network technology. And what it does, what money actually does, and I think Eric believes this too, is it brings out the collaborative nature in humans. Because by bringing us together, we collaborate. And when we collaborate, we're at our most prolific. And
it's also how we collaborate.
Yes,
money,
it is.
Money enables us
the
to...
language. So money is the universal language. And it's such a weird thing, is if you put together a Wall Street trader from New York City, living uptown in some swanky place, access to all sorts of technology, access to the delights of the most impressive city maybe in the world. You put him or her together with a tribeswoman from the Maasai in Kenya who has no access to technology, maybe even no access to water. The amazing thing is both of them understand the language of money. They understand scarcity, value, supply, demand. Do I have it? Do I not? Money is the universal language, whether we like it or not. Now, most of our...
It's interesting. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you there. It's interesting because the other way, and I'm sure Edge and Brian Coxwell will talk about this, music is the other universal language.
You're absolutely right.
Music and money.
Music and money. And it's funny what Eric was saying, that Hume, the Scottish philosopher, said that when humans come together, we do three things. We have money, we have language, we have law.
Yes.
But you're right, we also have music.
Yeah.
We also have laughing. We also have humor. These are things. And humor is a human network technology that we figured out, right? That we laugh together, right? So I think that...
That's why you can't tickle yourself. You have to have somebody else to tickle you.
I fucking love you, the way your head works. You can't tickle yourself.
Go on.
But it is true.
Yeah.
Will I tickle you?
Oh, go on.
Anyway, let's conclude. It's a very serious podcast about economics. I'll go over there and I will spoon you before you know it. Anyway. So, money is the most fantastic technology. We tend to have moralistic views about money, like avarice and greed, and money is the root of all evil. But I'll leave you with this idea that money allows us to trade. And when we first started trading, we stopped killing each other. Right? There is a French philosopher whose name escapes me, but I'll get it in 2 seconds, who said, in order to trade, we first had to throw down the spear. And this is the idea that money is actually a replacement for violence in many cases. Because once you sit down with people and you trade and you exchange money and value, then the first hunter-gatherers didn't have to kill each other to get stuff they wanted. So it's actually can be seen as not only an amazing social technology, but a technology that has actually engendered collaboration, not competition, and a certain amount of peace, not always war. To all you Patreons out there, thank you so much for supporting us. We couldn't do this without your support. It means a huge amount to us. Also, all your feedback, your suggestions, your comments, our comments to you, our replies to you, really is the essence of the whole thing. So again, thank you very much. And for all of you who might want to support us, check us out, patreon.com/David McWilliams.